My name is Peligian. I'm an artist. Here we are in my studio. I've been here in Long Island City for about 20 years. I drew from childhood obsessively. Started out making paintings and then evolved into sculpture, so the practice is pretty much a cross-disciplinary practice. I grew up just outside of Providence, Rhode Island, and I think I might have been the only Rhode Islander in my class at RISD. School was fun, it was easy, but nothing felt quite like making a drawing. I saw drawing as a diagram of an idea, of a way of seeing. I didn't need words, I didn't need things, I just needed this incredibly pure pleasure about picking up this tool and making an image. And it's never left, and I draw every day. I lost a decade's worth of work in a flood. There were roughly 3,100 pieces, mostly very large-scale charcoal drawings that were swept away in this flood. I had to start all over again. If there is a good part, it's this: I no longer was dependent or reliant on any kind of references. Anything that I had referenced before was out the window, and I was starting with everything that was much more meaningful to me going forward. These works are very directly connected to what I've experienced personally. I've always been obsessed by the body, by this thing that we live in, and how we get ushered into the world, which is through a pelvis. So I made Lucy, Redux. I had a real live human pelvis, and then I began to manipulate it. And ultimately I cast it, this is 24 karat gold, over plastic and metal. This led me to move from a single pelvis to multiples. Well, Lucy is gold. This is nickel-plated bronze, and there are 9 pelvi. I began initially going back to totems and Brancusi and this idea of stacking and building and stacking and building, and it was so linear, and I did it and was about to silver solder it and said, absolutely not. And so I took it all apart, and as I was doing it, it made me realize something about fragility in general, that even things appearing solid might not be at all. This is also, I think for me, at a certain point, a maquette for a more monumental piece. This is called Touch Me Now. It's a direct response to tragedy. A little over 3 years ago, my younger and only brother was killed in a car crash. I had been making the big pieces. Those pieces need exuberance, and exuberant was not in the vocabulary at this point. I set about working with lead, asking myself, how can I take something terribly elemental, heavy, impossible, and transcend it and lift it? And so I began to cut and shape and weave lead strips. It's interesting because you feel better when you finish a piece, always. You feel better because you have moved forward. And I think it's how artists get to know themselves better. I think it is largely about self-knowledge. And the other thing I should say, when I was starting to handle the lead, there was a moment when I felt incredibly grateful to live in a time where I can access ancient things, elemental things like lead and gold, and then move right into, fiberglass and video. So I think we have more options now, which is so wonderful. So I painted for many years before I expanded the practice as a more cross-disciplinary one, as it went from figurative painting to non-figurative painting, and then fully into sculpture painting. Bliss is kind of the synthesis of all of those ideas in a single painting. It's made on aluminum. I have the fabrication cut and formed, and then I begin to paint. So there are many, many layers before I get to the final finish. Basically, it's a colloidal. I make a colloidal with the paint. And as I was painting this one, I applied pigment concentrically. And I applied pigments that were opposites, so that when you walk across the painting, the color should shift, and you don't really know that it's still. I started work with interference pigments about 15 years ago. So I began to paint in body shops. I began to paint in boat yards. And as I was making the paintings and experimenting, the interference pigments became more and more interesting to me, in that I could have a surface move. This is called Hush Hush. This comes from a series of sculptures. The first one was Things Keep Their Secrets. And this, I use my own body as the medium. So my body is the tool, and I roll myself in and out of material, and then crawl out and reshape and configure this thing that I think I know, this very familiar form that I live in, into something that's still recollecting it, but becomes slightly more mysterious, more recognizable, and more connected to motion. Best Kept Secret was being made, the blue part, and I just looked at the marble and I thought about Best Kept Secret being something of our own bodies straddling territories. One was informing the other until the piece kind of almost, I would say it almost made itself. The dialogue was there, I think, between the stone and the fiberglass. You can see, if you look carefully, there's quite a lot of interference. If you get over onto the top of it, you'll see the color transition. It's subtle. It's not quite as dramatic as Bliss in terms of the migration of pigments. I walked into my studio one day and I just put my coffee down and I suddenly spun out, went back to my apartment, and there was an old black mink coat in there. And I thought, oh, okay, I need to cut this coat up. And I began to pattern it and map it onto a ladder, and then put 4 very fierce gold feet. I put it aside. It felt good. Just felt good to make the piece. And right around this time, my own mother died, and I wanted to honor that. So I thought I would grab this old table that had been kind of sitting around. I cast the legs, and there were 4 legs, and I realized, no. Suddenly when I saw 8, the thing came to life. It almost wanted to move. There's felt, then lambskin over the felt, and then finally the mink over the lambskin. So I took my shoes off when I finished it, and I went up. And I just wanted a certain sensuality. I don't have a choice. I feel like I don't have a choice. The work needs to be made. I mean, I really truly mean it when I say there's no way I could live long enough to produce what I want to produce. It has been incredibly difficult to stay the course. The overarching and overriding thing is that I can't stop. I think that my heritage was incredibly important in this idea that you can just do what you want to do and continue and go on. My father's mother and father both survived the Armenian genocide in 1915, Ottoman Turkey. My grandmother was sent off to die in the Syrian desert. She survived multiple rapes. And she had tattoos, which of course as a child I couldn't understand. These tattoos marked these women as soiled, basically, as defiled, as soiled. And somehow my grandmother managed to escape. I think every one of us standing today is a testament, is a miracle to those ancestors that managed to survive and to live and to flourish. I do wonder sometimes when I was putting the memorial sculpture up in South Florida and we're commemorating 5 genocides in 100 years, I ask myself, have we learned nothing? We're still doing this? It's standing still in front of the business school. It's about 20 feet. It's made of aerospace grade aluminum that was all rolled through a machine that the fabricator built. The whole process took about 22 months. We were rolling 22-foot sheets of aerospace grade aluminum through this machine in order to generate curve after curve, and then we made it in 2 parts, welded it, and then mirror polished it. The sculpture at Nova Southeast is called Susurrus, which is really like the chuchote, like the whisper of a wind. So the piece commemorates the 5 genocides of the 20th century, beginning with the Armenian genocide, going up through the Holocaust, Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia. Susurrus really was a turning point, too. I realized that I really loved the scale. I liked how many components there were. I liked working that physically. I liked being able to step away. In a way, you don't have as much contact with it. It's just you put it there and it's there. And that was very appealing to me. I think art reminds us that we're human. I think it reminds us of where we've been, where we are, who we've been, who we are, and where we might be going, and who we might become. I think it's a reminder. And even if it reaches a handful, it's better than not reaching anyone. And I think there's just something intensely pleasurable about coming upon it. It's a reminder that we're all in this thing called life together. As fragile as it is, it's a reinforcement. So I think those things they matter deeply to me.